Hey guys, today I'm back in Trailmakers and I wanted to try making a tank. Now I'm not sure how conducive the grid building style of the game will be for this, but I thought it could be a good challenge. So let's get right into it. So I loaded into the sandbox here, and the first thing I did was flew over to this clear area and I wanted to start working on some movement designs. But before I did that, I needed to build up a very basic structure here. So the first thing I put down here was an armored seat, and after that I started building up a bit of a base here. Now it's a little skinny, but I thought it should be good enough for some testing, and after I did that, I put down some legs. Now once I got it about the right height, I also put down a helicopter engine here, and I was hoping I could use this to drive my chain around. So after I got that put in place here, you can see I give it a test, and it also has a lot of torque, so it can sort of do this. But since it was mostly working here, I put down a block, and on that block, I put down a hinge. Now I wanted to start working on the tread, and the hinge was going to be really important for that. And if I set the hinge to have 0 strength, each block is going to be able to slightly hinge up and down, and that'll create each distinct tread piece. And this test seemed to go really well, right up until I spun it up too much, but that shouldn't have been too big of a deal, and once I had this looking good, I decided to extend it out for even more links. So just put down a bunch more here, and after that, I reconnected it to the engine, and given it another test, it seems to move really well here. It acts almost entirely like a tank tread would, and it has pretty low friction. Now, I will need a way for this to start disconnected from the rest of the machine, and for that, I'm gonna use a decoupler. This allows me to just completely disconnect it, and is exactly what I want. And with that done, you can see I added in 2 more helicopter engines, and I put down some pipes on them. I was hoping to get right in between the 2 parts of the tank tread and pull it along, but it seemed to bind up, and it wasn't really pulling it. And even once it fell on right, you can see here, as soon as I started to move it, the tank tread just fell to the side. So to fix that, what I wanted to do here is delete the bottom part of each tread piece and add on a pipe. This gives me a little more room to push with, and it seemed to help a little bit, but it still wasn't exactly what I wanted. And of course, I still need a way to loop around the tread and reconnect it to itself. So with this sort of working, I decided just to temporarily get rid of it and extend out the base of this thing a little bit more and give myself a little bit of an easier time when testing. Now you can see here, I have some spinning servos, and they seem to spin up these blocks pretty well, and I'm hoping to use these to drive the tread. So with those in place, after that, I put down another decoupler and just built up my tread the same way as before. Now to loop it back on itself, you can see here, I'm basically just adding on more hinges. After that, I had a complete loop. So with that looking good, I wanted a way to easily test this, and I decided to rotate it and put it flat. Now starting it out here, when I tried spinning it up, it was moving it around, and that was good. And I wanted to try decoupling it next and seeing how it would do. And unfortunately, it just didn't seem to be great. It wasn't falling down on the spinning servos, so when I tried spinning them up, it extended out the tread, but then the tread just fell off. And of course, that's not really gonna work. Now next, I decided to get rid of the blocks I was using on those servos, and I was gonna replace it with pipes. And after I got all those on there, it did seem to work. You can see it falls right down on the pipes, and as I started to spin it up, it did extend out the tread, but then it just got stuck. And after looking around at it for a while, I realized the problem is that the hinges are only able to extend out about 60 degrees, and since I only have a single hinge, it wasn't able to get around the corners. And adding on more hinges here did seem to sort of work, but the pipes were having a really hard time grabbing on properly, and I didn't really have a great way of tensioning it without making the hinges bind up again. Now that's when I switched to using tractor beams, and I was gonna use these to rotate around the chain, and it was working, but you'll notice it got really glitchy, and the chain just broke apart. Now after that, I went back to my servo design, and it was working better when I used pipes on the chain, but it still would just explode randomly, and the chain was really unstable. So I decided to clear that design, because I had a different one instead that I thought would be a lot more reliable. Now you can see me putting down a lot of blocks here, and after I did that, I put down a steering hinge. Now I set the angle of the steering hinge to be only 15 degrees, and on that, I put down a piston. Now after I had that down, I wanted to give it a test here, and you can see I'm able to swivel it side to side, and that's gonna be really important soon. Now I copied over a lot more of these steering hinges and a lot more pistons. And fortunately like this, they still are able to swing side to side, and the plan is gonna be to push them out from back to front, and that's gonna push me forward as long as I angle all the pistons in the right direction. So with that done, I needed a way to address every single one of the pistons individually, and to do that, I put down a distance sensor. Now these are gonna sense a block in front of them, and as I push that block forward, each distance sensor is gonna turn on the piston that's right in front of it, and that's gonna create that chain effect that I need. Now I put down a few blocks at the end here, and after I had that in place, I put down a piston here, and on that I put down another piston. And you can see now a very simple version of what I want to have happen. I put down a block on the front, you can see me able to pull it back and forth, and that'll go right in front of all the sensors. Now I was getting blocked at first, and also it wasn't long enough to reach all of them, and to have that happen, I need to add a lot more pistons. So I just did that here. I have a huge chain now, and on the end of it, you can see I added on a block, and I'm gonna use this to toggle each of the sensors. So I wanted to test it out here, but all the extra weight that I have now is making it fall over too easily, and it's a little hard to see what's going on. So I decided to extend out the legs a bit more, and after that, gave it another shot here, and as I pull it in, it does seem to be working. Each of the pistons goes off right in front of it, and this is what I need. Now, I want a way to automatically control that piston though, so I don't have to manually push it out and pull it in. And to do that, I put down a servo, set it to rotate 360 degrees, and on that, I put down an angle meter. Now, as this rotates, it's gonna turn on and off, and I can use this regular signal to push out and pull in the pistons and automatically control the legs. And you can see that working here, but there is a small problem. You'll notice as it pushes out and as it pulls in, it extends out the legs, but I only want the legs to move when I'm pushing out the pistons. This is because if I have the legs push out one way and then pull back in the opposite way, I'm basically gonna go forward and then go backward. So in order to fix that problem, I added an AND gate here, and this is basically looking for when there's something in front of the distance sensor and when I'm pushing out the piston, and only then does it turn on. You can see here as it pulls in, it's not turning on that piston only until it starts to push out, and then it pushes out that first one. So with that looking good, I extended it out to all of them, and it's a lot clearer here. You can see as it pulls in, none of the pistons are extending, but when it pushes out, they all go in order. So that looking good, I decided to rotate it on its side, and after that, I added on a second set of legs as well. Now, it took a little bit more logic than I showed, but it wasn't too bad, and I managed to get it all working here, but it definitely wasn't perfect. You can see as I give it a test, it flips up really quickly here. After it tries to take another step, it just flips up on its back immediately. Now, I was trying to figure out what was going on here, and I thought maybe it was a weight imbalance problem, so I wanted to extend this out further back and add on another set of legs. Now, once I got that on both sides here, you can see giving it a test, it does move forward, but it's still acting really strange. It sometimes flies into the air, and it's really not a controlled walk at all. So I tried lowering the speed of the pistons. I thought maybe the max speed was too much, but even lowering it to 40 was still acting strange. So at this point, I wanted to add on some springs to hopefully dampen the load a little bit, and once I started adding this onto the front, I tried adding it onto one of the back legs as well, but that's when I got an error that the structure was too complex. That's gonna be a problem, because every time I add on a spring, it adds on 5 complexity points, and if I'm already at the limit and I have like 20 more to go, there's a lot to shave here. So I tried taking off half the legs, and now I really didn't like the look of it, and it still wasn't even working that well. It's still bouncing around a lot, and I can't get consistent motion out of this. So I decided to take a break and play some soccer, and once I was done with that, I wanted to start with a completely new design, and this is the one that ended up working out best. Now, I wanted to break down how one individual piece of tread moves around and see if that would help me at all. So I put down a servo and a piston, and on that, I put down a couple of blocks, and the outer block is gonna be like the outside of the tank tread. And you can see here, I can rotate it around the outside, pull it in, I can rotate it around again, and then push it out. And if I compare that movement to how tank tread moves, you can see it's basically the exact same thing. And if I just keep constructing a bunch of these individual pieces, I'll be able to basically construct the entire tank tread. So with that done, I added on a second set of pistons here, and these are gonna push out at the opposite time when the front ones do. And with that done, I added on another servo and another set of blocks here, and when I gave it a test, you can see it does the exact opposite of whatever the first block is doing. This really easily is effectively creating another one of these tank tread pieces, and with that done, what I wanted to try doing was actually making a car with this. Now, I was hoping to add more in a bit, but I figured if this was actually able to pull it along, then I'd be in really good shape. And you can see now as I try it, it's not bouncing up and down or anything weird, but it wasn't really pulling the car forward at all. And to fix that, I lowered the speed of the pistons, and that should give it more time to actually pull against the ground. And with that done, it actually seemed to work. It's pulling that wheel forward, and I was pretty happy with the results. Now, I liked where that was going, but I wanted to add on 2 more pieces of the tread here, and this is that at any given time, I'd have 2 pieces of tread on the ground. This just smooths out the ride a lot more, but trying to get this to work was kinda hard. The problem is, once these get really close together, they don't slide past each other very well, and I tried using braces instead to have a lower profile, but these seem to catch on each other a lot, and they just wouldn't stop hitting into each other. Now, I'd almost be okay with that, but sometimes when they did that, I'd randomly start getting velocity, and you see here I'm spinning around, and that's just not gonna work. So I moved it 1 block further out, and it makes the illusion slightly worse, but it should be okay. And now to control this, what I wanted to do is put down another servo, and I was gonna use this spinning motion again to automatically control each of the 4 steps of the motion. What I mean by the 4 steps here is that I have one that pushes out the block, one that rotates it around, one that pulls it back in, and one that rotates it again to reset it. Now, once I had all those put in place, the next thing I wanted to do is put down another directional sensor here, and what this one's gonna do is automatically rotate around the servo the exact amount I need so that it snaps right into place. And you can see here, it's straight up and down now, but I also need a way to rotate it back again, and that's why I added in another servo here. And with that in place, give it another test, and you can see here, rotates around to the right amount, it pulls in, after a little while, it rotates around again, and after that, it pushes pushes back out, and that completes a full cycle. Now I was also able to make this a lot faster, and this is already looking like a pretty capable machine. Now I also need to double up the logic again, and this is for the other set of pistons. These act somewhat autonomously, so once I built that up here, I wanted to give it a test, and it was working. It was actually pulling in at the right time, and you can see at any given time, I have 2 blocks that are facing the ground. Now I also deleted the big wheels I had, and I replaced them with smaller wheels. This will allow the tread to actually touch the ground and start to move. So with all that in place, wanted to give it a test in the ground, and the first result was pretty promising. It was moving around really quickly, and it was actually pulling me forward, but I did notice it was acting slightly strange. At times, the pistons weren't fully expanding or contracting, and it just wasn't working perfectly. Off the ground though, it seemed to be working fine, so my first thought would have had something to do with the pistons not being able to fully contract. So I tried using springs to maybe dampen the load a little bit, but this didn't seem to fix the problem. In fact, it was still acting really weird. So while I was messing around, I added in some mini thrusters here, and this is so I could start turning, but that's when I noticed that the angle sensors were not acting right. As I started to bounce up and down, they were spinning around erratically, but they should always be pointing straight forward. This is messing up the timings of the tank tread, and that's what's causing it to act weird. Now, fortunately, the tank tread itself should be okay. I just need a new system to control the timing, and for that, I've actually already developed it, and this is using the piston pushing in and out. Now, I realized if I put down some more distance sensors here, if I set the very last one to pull in the pistons and the very first one to push out the pistons, it'll automatically move forward and back, and the sensors in the middle I can use for staging. With a little bit of refinement, you can see here this design I have, and I connected it up here, and it actually seemed to be fine. I was pulling the tank forward, but I noticed it was a little bit slow at the end, and also when it pulls in, I need to block the inputs, otherwise it's going to move the tank in reverse. With these issues, I figured I could deal with in logic, and with this looking good, next thing I wanted to do here is add on another tread to the other side. Now once I did that, I also moved all the logic to the middle, and I simplified the front a lot, and you can see here, giving it a test, it moved forward really well. Now I still wanted to fix the problem where it's not able to move half the time, and in order to do that, I needed a few more logic gates. Now once I got these all pasted in here, basically what I'm doing is adding in an AND gate, so as it pushes out, it goes in the correct order, but as it pulls back in, it activates the other set of AND gates, and that's going to make the tank tread move in reverse, but since the inputs are reversed, it actually makes it go in the right direction. This is a lot harder to explain now that I'm actually trying to explain it, but I think you can see here the result. Basically, it just continuously moves forward, and it does exactly what you'd expect. Now, of course, with the front of the tank completely done, I wanted to add on the back. Now, in order to do this, I pretty much just copy pasted the tread to the back as well, and given it a run here, it was working, like it was moving, but it wasn't going anywhere. And that's when I realized when I copied it over to the back, it's actually moving in the wrong direction because I forgot to reverse the logic. So the two halves are just pulling against each other and nothing gets done. But it was easy enough just to flip that around, and you can see here, I'm able to move forward and all seems to be good. Now, next up, I moved some logic to the front, and after that, I wanted to add on 2 more logic gates. Now, these are controlled by A and D respectively, and what that's gonna do is that when I'm holding one or the other, it's gonna activate either the left or the right side of the tank, but if I hold down both, it makes both move. This means that I'm able to turn to one side or the other, or just go straight forward, and you can see me testing that out here. Now, it does turn, but I noticed that the tank tread wasn't working properly anymore. It just wasn't rotating the way that it was supposed to. Now, I had forgotten that all of my angle sensors were on the right side of the tank, so if I try to control the left side of the tank tread pieces don't recenter properly, and I need to add in a separate set just for that side. But with that done, it actually does seem to be working out fine here, and I'm able to turn. And with the mechanics done, it's just time for the aesthetics and also the turret. Now, in order to do this, I started putting down some blocks here, and I wasn't really sure exactly what I was going for, but I wanted to completely encase the top and partially encase the back and the front. But I noticed a problem. My complexity was already at 695, and I only had 5 extra blocks to place. So I started out by simplifying the design as much as I possibly could, and after I worked on that, I put down a rotational servo, and I put down a hinge on that. This is going to be the basis for the turret, and it's going to allow me to pivot it up and down and also rotate it side to side. Now, that in place, I put down some blocks for a platform here. I started building up the walls and built up the turret. Now, I was just thinking of using the tank cannon to actually shoot with because it's really easy to add, and also it adds very little complexity. So this was definitely one of the more approachable things to do here. Now, I ended up encasing the turret, and with that done, I wanted to give it a quick walking test, and it seemed to be pretty good, and shooting it here also seemed to work out fine. I think the idea of it being tank tread and not just individual legs is a little more convincing once I have the whole body put on here, and you can see now I'm even going for a turn, and it actually seems to be working out pretty well. Now, of course, tanks don't just go on flat ground though, and I wanted to try going on the sand here, and it seemed to be working almost exactly the same way, and I was really happy to see that. So I wanted to take it on the slope and see how that would do, and you can see it actually was working out fine. It was slipping down a little bit. That's to be expected though, but once I got up to the top here, I was able to fall right in, and I wanted to try shooting at the soccer ball. So guys, thanks for watching. This is definitely not what I envisioned when I started the project, but I think it turned out pretty pretty well here, and I'm glad I got to mess around with some logic. So if you have any more suggestions for builds, make sure to leave it down in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Make sure to like the video and all that other stuff, and otherwise, until next time.